Members, we don't have a quorum at the current time, but we are going to get started here because at least the first bill is going to be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. I am going to call Representative McNamar up, and we are going to deal with House File 1970.
I am Representative J. McNamar, District 12A. Thank you, Representative Chairman Mahoney and committee members. My bill is for a grant we received last year. We for Denko to ethanol plant in Morris. We're looking to change the match fund from $1.25 million to $750,000. Mick Miller, plant manager, is here to talk to us today.
Mr. Miller, if you have a minute's worth of testimony, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. Chairman Mahoney, members of the committee, Mick Miller, General Manager of Denko 2 in Morris. Real brief, we worked last session on a grant for energy and water improvements. Senator Westrom and Representative McNamar helped carry us through, and basically we were working on a $1.25 million grant, and last minute changes were made. The grant was reduced to $750,000, and there was some basically, I believe, just oversight that the matching portion stayed at $1.25 million. Today our request is to change the match to $750,000.
Might have just been a hope on someone's part. It was $1. Thank you, Mr. Miller. There was a representative here that had a question that looked like it, and we're really just keeping the same match 1-to-1.
Correct.
But because our grant was only $750,000, we're changing that $1.25 million down to what the actual grant was, because you were asking for the $1.25 million grant.
Correct.
Any questions? Representative Leidiger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a strange bill to me, and I don't know how. I don't understand what side is the government side, what side is the private side. Are we talking about $700,000 the owners have to come up with to get a match of what again, please?
The state side is, thank you, Chairman Mahoney. Just state side is $750,000, and the non-public side is $750,000. It's a 1-to-1 match.
Mr. Chair, and so why are we reducing the amount that the owners need to come up with?
Representative McNamar.
Well, we think it was a mistake when the bill was written. We asked for $1.25 million to start out with, and we got $750,000 instead. So they reduced the amount we got, and all we're doing is just ask to match what we got. So we got less than what we had asked for.
Representative McNamar. Representative Leidiger.
So
if I might explain.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Last year when the bill went in, when it came to the committee, it had $1.25 million request to be matched by, and they wrote it to be matched by $1.25 million. The actual bill came out off the House floor in the omnibus budget bill at $750,000 as a grant from the state government, or from DEED, and the match was inadvertently stayed at 1.25. Typically, we write these bills as a 1-to-2 or 1-to-1 or 1-to-3 match. That's just an oversight on our part, and I didn't even see it last year as we were writing the bill. So we're just going back to our typical way we would write a bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks. I appreciate that explanation. Then can I just ask one general question?
Sure.
How is this ethanol plant doing?
Mr. Miller.
Representative, members of the committee, we purchased the facility in 2010. and things are going just fine. We operated through some very, very difficult times in 2012 throughout the drought. Things seem to be much more balanced with supply and demand. As far as the facility itself, the ownership group is a local ownership group with a lot of commitment to keep this facility operating in Morris, Minnesota, and maintain the jobs. This grant and these funds are greatly appreciated as part of an energy and water reduction project so that we can continue to help the facility become more efficient and help the facility become more competitive longer term.
That was, my last question was what the money was going to be used for, and I heard you start to explain it's a water reduction initiative. And is this new technology? Is this new inventions? What exactly are we talking about?
Representative Chairman and members of the committee, the technology that we're looking at today is would not be considered new technology, but new implementation into the ethanol industry. So there's an opportunity for other ethanol facilities to see and recognize the improvements that we're looking to make in Morris, and hopefully that can spread throughout other facilities as well.
Representative Leidiger.
No, I'll end there. Thank you,
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further questions, I'm going to lay this bill over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill.
Thank you, Chair Mahoney.
McNamar, thank you. Mr. Miller, and
Thank you.
you didn't even get to introduce yourself.
Okay.
Thank you. Our next bill on the agenda is Representative Rosenthal's House File 2268, my favorite piece of legislation. Welcome to the committee, Representative Rosenthal. I'll let Representative Norton move your bill.
I'd be quite happy to move House File 2268
For re-referral
to taxes.
to taxes. Members, there is an amendment, but before we get started, this is an Economic Development Committee. This is not a tax committee. I'll be pretty clear that your questions, hopefully you'll explain the whole bill, Representative Rosenthal, but the questions that we have should be focused on economic development, not on policy of taxes or not, or other. So, would you like Representative Norton to move the I can't get it to move off my fingers, they're so dry, the A2 amendment?
Mr. Chair, that'd be great.
Does everyone have a copy of the A2 amendment? Is there any comments on the A2 amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of the A2 amendment, or would you like to explain your amendment?
Mr. Chair, members, currently in the fund, there's $12 million, and I believe it's run out already this year. And since the bill was enacted in 2010, the money has been gone way before the year end. And this bill simply takes the current threshold of $12 million and moves it to $15 million.
Is there any any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of the A2 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes. We have another amendment here. Do we have copies of this amendment? If you could pass that out. The page. We have an amendment to pass out here.
Chair? Was that the A2 amendment that that was voted on?
Yeah. From 12 to 15 million.
Can we ask a question on that amendment? I realize we passed it, but
I think right now would be a good time to
While
ask
we're
that
doing that,
question.
Mr. Chair,
Representative
Representative.
thank you. Representative, how many more months are we going to get out of that additional $3 million?
Mr. Chair, Representative, that's a good idea, a good question. I don't think there's an answer till we see what the need is. I would hope that it would give us some additional time, and if we need to address it again, I think we should.
Representative Leidinger.
This is the 12 million you were saying, and I just don't know this, so I'm really trying to kind of figure this out, especially while the paperwork's being handed out. But you're saying that the 12 million will run out when? You're on top of this figure?
This current, Mr. Chair, Representative, believe March 3rd it ran out of money this year. What happens is, Mr. Chair, Representative, is there's a lot of demand for this credit and for businesses that are, say, risky ventures and need this kind of funding to get off the ground and be successful. So what happens is they line up at the very beginning to try and get their request filled immediately. And this is an attempt to address that. I'm certainly open to upping the amount if necessary.
Representative Leidinger, if I might.
Please.
Every year this has been in effect. It's gotten shorter and shorter. Just mathematically, you could almost, I think it's $60 million to get us through 12 months. Frankly, I'm not interested, and I don't think many of us are interested in making wealthier people wealthy by giving them our tax dollars overly. So maybe there might be a couple people, but not too many. So has everyone got the H22A3 amendment? Okay. And this is I'm going to claim responsibility for this particular one. And what this amendment does is puts a sunset, it changes the sunset. Because right now, the whole program sunsets it actually did sunset on December 31st of 2014. We're going to change it to 2018. And then it will, all the other dates correspond to expand it out another 4 years. I had to be convinced that I shouldn't do just a 2-year extension until I see if the venture capitalist would actually start going somewhere beyond the golden crescent of western Hennepin County. So is there any conversation about the A3 amendment? Any conversation, any discussion about the A3? Seeing none. All those in favor of the A3 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Now we have it in the shape that I think the bill can move forward, can be discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this bill originated in the 2009 Bipartisan Small Business Caucus and was designed and signed into law for the year 2010, and it's due to sunset this year. Originally, it was for $12 million. We wanted to see what the effects would be. It's been very, very successful. There's lots of entrepreneurs in our communities that have really great ideas that need an extra boost. They are not necessarily all going to be successful, but in order for us to help them take the leap that might provide some great economic activity to the state, which this has already done. I think somewhere in the range of $100 million has been accrued as a result of this funding. So instead of me rambling, I'm going to turn it over to the testifiers in deference to the committee's time, and I know you're all on a tight timeline. So I would like to introduce Mr. Jeff Misling. He's the CEO of Untitled and has used the credit, and I'd like to speak to that.
Mr. Misling?
Misling, yes,
Misling.
thank you.
Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the tape. You've got a couple other people behind you that anxiously, so we've got about a half an hour for this bill.
Okay. Yes, my name is Jeff Misling. I'm the founder and CEO of SpineThera, and we are a pharmaceutical company based in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. And first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. I'm here in strong support of the Angel Tax Credit Program. I want to briefly share my personal experience with the program and also my ideas for how it can better benefit the state of Minnesota. When an entrepreneur decides to quit a job and start a company, they're taking a huge leap of faith. I had to have a conversation with my wife to quit a very solid job at a company in Eden Prairie called Surmotics and say, let's pursue this dream. And everyone has to cross what entrepreneurs call the valley of death, which is how do you go from having an idea, this wonderful idea to create life-saving technology, to actually having a product available. In the very beginning, when you have only an idea and no money, who's going to be the first person to give you some money to get this launched? The classic is friends, family, and founder. The angel capital networks in town, there's groups like Minnesota Angels, Gopher Angels, even they won't touch you when you're just simply an idea. They want to see something tangible. Using the Angel Tax Credit Program, I was able to raise $480,000 for my pharmaceutical company, a company that's going to need to raise $25 million in total before we have a product that we can sell off into a larger pharmaceutical company or in the market. So you can see how risky it would be to put the first $500,000 into a venture that's going to need eventually $25 million. The Angel Tax Credit Program, in my case, brought in $320,000 from the state of Wisconsin. So this is money that flowed into the state. Of course, those investors received the tax credit, and we're very grateful to have it. But I think that's one aspect of the program that needs to be also understood, is it's attracting capital from outside Minnesota into Minnesota companies. It keeps us competitive with the surrounding states. And one thing you need to know about angel investors is they are very biased to invest locally. Most angel investors will only look at a company that's within 50 miles of where they are. So if you're talking to somebody, that lives in Milwaukee or San Francisco or Boston, they by default don't want to hear from you. But when you mention that the Minnesota Angel Tax Credit Program can return 25% of their investment immediately or within the next year, they don't hang up on you, and they'll listen. And I was able to raise $320,000 from Wisconsin. So the program is great. I'm convinced it's created jobs. I think the folks from Deed here can attest to that with real numbers. It's created jobs already. It's already gained a return on investment. I know their survey showed that 30% of the money, 30% of the investors said they wouldn't have put their money in without the credit. So that's an immediate return on investment. But there's two problems that I could see for the state to address. First, the program is running out of money faster and faster. In 2011, it ran out in November. The next year, it ran out in July. Then it ran out in May. And this year, it ran out on March 3rd. If that trend continues, next year, it'll run out in 1 week or as fast as Mr. Nelson's office at Deed can process the applications, which is a very efficient operation. But there is pent-up demand for this. And what it's actually done is created an investment season in Minnesota where everyone is lining up to take advantage of the credit and make their investment. That is disruptive to the flow of a startup company. And literally, I'm sitting here today, I have $710,000 of investments on the table with the investors saying, if there's angel tax credit money, we will write you the checks. But if there's not, well, we'll see. They haven't told me firmly no, but that's what it gets down to for the individual companies, is that it really gets investors to move and make a decision to invest. And I would actually advocate that we increase the funding to $20 to $25 million a year. If you believe that it creates jobs and you believe there's a return on investment, that's more money coming into the state and more jobs created. The second issue, which I think has been addressed already, is it needs to be extended into the future. So I'm happy to see the amendment passed today. I won't take up any more time, but would be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Messling?
Missling, yes.
Missling. Seeing, Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Missling, I think that your testimony was spot on in terms of this program. I know this program has been successful in other states around the country. It's a great incubator for startup businesses. Like you say, nobody's going to borrow you the money. I can imagine, and my question to you is, I imagine you talked to banks, and what was their reaction to your idea?
Well, actually, my father was a banker. He's retired. So he told me before, don't even waste your time going to a bank, right? So he, just having that relationship with my father, he he steered me away from a bank. I mean, you have no collateral, you have nothing. I mean, you need money to file a patent application, right? I mean, that's going to cost $15,000 to file a halfway decent patent application. Where, so you have to dip into your personal savings, and you need those people to take that leap of faith that they believe in you as an entrepreneur, they believe in the idea that you're pursuing, and they're going to write you that first check. But a bank is just out of the question.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you. That's exactly my point. And I think that this is a very, very good program. We're probably not putting enough money into this from a jobs perspective, just like you say. And I'm happy to support this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Missling, thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Did you have it looks like you've got a couple others.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I believe the Commissioner of Deed is here, and we'd like to hear what she has to say.
The Commissioner wants to come up and talk to me about angel investment after the last time? She's a brave woman. Commissioner, how nice to see you again. I think it was last time or the time before that. So, please identify yourself for the tape.
Mr. Chairman and members, I'm Katie Clark-Sieben, the Commissioner of Deed. I'm delighted to be back today talking about what we think is a very important program for the state's economic development program. The governor has recommended $15 million per year in funding for the Angel Tax Credit Program. The legislature passed and Deed launched the Angel Tax Credit Program in July of 2010 to encourage private investments in technology startups, high technology startups in the state, particularly software, medical device, and biotechnology firms. And there is a reason why this program is aimed at high technology, because we believe that these industries help produce some of the higher wages that we will see in the state. You just heard an excellent testimony, and I'd like to just provide a reminder of what the goal of this program is and what it's aimed at accomplishing. This program is our one state economic development tool to fund companies at this point in the business life cycle. So as you heard, these are companies that typically have 1 to 2 employees. They often have an idea, a concept, the beginnings of a product, but haven't yet taken that product to market, and they're in that product development stage. Often the fundraising that they are receiving is through family and friends and networks, their personal networks, because at that level of, in this stage of the business life cycle, there are very few investors who will take a look at this high risk of a project. This program is about investing in entrepreneurs in innovation in our state so that we're growing the next 3M or Medtronic. Not every single one of the angel companies that we're funding is going to be successful with their product, but we believe by supporting entrepreneurs and innovators in our state that eventually we will see greater job growth. What we have seen so far, according to the study conducted by Economic Development Research, that this program supported an average of 512 jobs at Minnesota startup firms from 2010 to 2012, and that number is expected to climb to an average of 635 jobs from 2013 to 2020. And I just want to remind you, we've spent a lot of time recently talking about the Minnesota Investment Fund, the Minnesota Job Creation Fund, where we see hundreds of new jobs, thousands of new jobs. This is a very different program specifically for the small startup with 1 to 2 employees. So these job creation numbers are significant job creation numbers for this size of business in the state. In addition, I think it's important to also highlight that 571 indirect jobs were created in 2013 through this program. And I think the key to this program is that this is driving new investment into the state of Minnesota that we would not have seen otherwise. This is attracting investors from Minnesota. This is attracting investors from other states and outside of our country to take a look at entrepreneurs and innovators here in the state and invest in their businesses. And one thing that we know is that entrepreneurs like to surround themselves with entrepreneurs because they can all leverage the networks that they each have. They know how to surround themselves with others that are doing product development. As these companies grow, we are going to see additional growth happen in greater Minnesota, and we're already seeing that. From the annual report, which will be released this afternoon, I believe there are 34 companies that have already expanded to locations in greater Minnesota to further develop their product. So this program was started in 2010. It's still very beginning stages of this program, but a very important one that I hope we have your support on.
So before we go any farther, I'm the next one on the list. Mr. Albright comes next. Commissioner, I know this. You know this question's coming, so I hope you've prepared. Can you tell me how many of those 512 direct jobs and 500 and some odd other ones are outside of the Golden Crescent of Eden Prairie to Maple Grove?
Mr. Chair and members, there are very few, but what we do know is that the companies that have already experienced this program, so it just started in 2010, where we were investing in companies of 1 to 2 employees. Growth doesn't usually just happen overnight. It typically takes some time to add jobs to a business. We know that around 34 of those businesses have already started expanding their operations in greater Minnesota as they look for additional square footage needs and other resources to grow their business. So we do think that as this program continues over time, we will see additional economic development in greater Minnesota from this program.
And Commissioner, it's really too bad that those jobs aren't growing any place other than that Golden Triangle and greater Minnesota, because all the rest of the metro area. And Commissioner, I'm using you as a foil, and that's really somewhat inappropriate. I mean, I'm really speaking to the venture capital community. There was an implicit promise from the venture capital community 4 years ago when I sat in a room and had discussions about this particular bill, that they would actually get outside of the metro area. They would actually look at statewide. And they have not lived up to their promise at all. So it's really frustrating to me, as one of the people who blood, sweat, and teared this bill through. So to the venture capital world, I really wanted this to be a 2-year extension of this bill at this particular time, and I will fight until we pass the bill to get a 2-year extension to see what the venture capital world does. Because they didn't listen the first time. I'm wondering if they just got earwax. So I will leave it at that, Commissioner. And did you want to respond to that, Representative Rosenthal?
At the risk of...
Good idea.
No.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm going to throw the Commissioner a lifeline here. Because in the testimony of Mr. Missling, he came from a company by the name of Surmotics, who I'm very familiar with, who uses liquid fluid retention for preparation of test modules for a whole host of organizations. But the genesis for that organization actually came out of another one of our longstanding organizations named Medtronic. The CEO that was at Surmotics came from Medtronic. So the legacy that is our research and development community hovers around a supporting cast of characters, if you will, which also, from habits, and we're all creatures of habit, comes from where is the research base, and in this case, it's the University of Minnesota. It's folks that are in similar environments, whether it be in biotechnology, the high-tech, or existing organizations. And so this golden crescent that you speak of is not something, unfortunately, that can be forced into other areas of the state for similar purposes, although I think every purpose, as we're familiar with Representative Gunther's area with AGCO down there, from a standpoint of what's happening down there, that could very likely spawn, as we move in terms of technological advances in the agricultural area. You might find that as being a hotbed, a new golden crescent down there. You might find it up on, dare I say, the range for other purposes. either technological advancements or otherwise. But more to the point in terms of what my question is for the Commissioner. You mentioned in your testimony that, and as Mr. Misling did as well, is that you're attracting investment capital from outside of the state.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a list of who that is, and you're tracking it, and for what purposes from a exit interview? What type of information are you collecting, and for what reasons and purposes do they find this mechanism so attractive? And if they do, are there recommendations that they might attribute to it that would make it better?
Mr. Chair and members, we do have that information, and I would like to call, if appropriate, Mr. Chair, Jeff Nelson, who is our Angel Tax Credit Coordinator, to share further detail with you. I would like to take a moment to just highlight the fantastic work that Jeff does. We hear from businesses regularly how efficiently run this program is and how they're often surprised at how quickly they receive a response.
You hadn't, I was. Mr. Nelson, please identify yourself for the tape and answer the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jeff Nelson. I run the Angel Tax Credit Program for DEED. The program has been in operation since 2010, as the Commissioners mentioned, and the statistics have been fairly consistent. About a quarter to 30% of both the number of investors and the investment dollars have come from outside of Minnesota. Minnesota's program is relatively unique. As Mr. Misling was stating to the committee, the tax credit program that we run is a refundable tax credit, meaning the investors need not have any Minnesota tax liability in order to take advantage of the program. I think that is a huge factor in why we've been able to attract so many investors and so many dollars from outside of Minnesota.
Does that give you your answer?
I have another one.
Okay, go right ahead.
Just a quick
Representative
one.
Albright.
To that extent,
But
then...
we're going to be done with this
Yep.
and vote on it in 10 minutes, and I got 2 more testifiers.
Not a problem. To the extent that we see, the arteries going out into the state via our transportation system, whether it be 169 or 94 or 35 going up to Duluth, do you find any mention of along those corridors of commerce as a comment made by these people as far as they're aligning with other like-minded organizations outside of that Golden Crescent to, reflect upon the chair's concerns about the concentration in the western suburbs?
Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I think you won't be surprised that in the legislative report that will be coming out later today, we do have a map in that report. And you won't be surprised that there's sort of a corridor going from St. Cloud to the metro area down to Rochester. That's where the primary investment is.
Thank you.
And Representative Albright and to the members, I was pleasantly surprised. And Commissioner and Mr. Nelson, if you could step aside, I know there's 2 other people looking to testify, and we'll get them up there. Just to the venture capital community, I met a person at one of our receptions that we don't have to pay for, I guess, and everybody's upset about. That was talking about they had just done 11 investments, and because that person took 6 months to do their homework, they found 9 of them outside of the metro area, and only 2 of them unfortunately in the Golden Crescent. I'm going to really use that, and everybody will be talking about the Golden Crescent. So that was a lesson that if investors do their homework, there are other places in this state to invest. Who would like to go first?
I will, Mr. Chair. Genevieve Plumidor with Life Science Alley. We've been before this committee before. Life Science Alley represents all of the medical device companies, biotechnology companies, and biopharma companies here in the state. We have the big ones, the Medtronics and the 3Ms, and then we also have the early stage development companies as the testifier that I brought here today. Life Science Alley just asks for your continued support of this tax credit. It is has been very important in the last year to leverage dollars and investments into Minnesota, as was evidenced in the Department of Revenue tax report, as well as the report that Life Science Alley came out with at the end of last year, where the rest of the country is seeing less investment. We're seeing greater investment in these early stage development companies. CEOs such as the testifier here today are finding that larger VCs are not wanting to invest during the precarious time, as the prior testifier had said. So I'd like to just cede my time to Pramod Hosharin. He's from Nerva Medical, who is going to tell you about his angel success story, and he's currently in the first year of R&D development of his product.
And before he starts, I'd like to throw a comment about your boss, Dale, Mr. Wallstrom.
Yep.
He was very instrumental in getting this passed the first time, and everyone should be very grateful to Dale and Life Science Alley that likes this program. So, with you.
Good afternoon, sir, Mr. Chair. So thank you very much, Life Science Alley, as well, for inviting me to share my passion with you. My name is Pramod Hosharin, like Genevieve, I'm sorry, mentioned that I started a company to build a catheter like this that would actually save the heart. So in short, since we don't have a lot of time, so our technology would cool the heart down to prevent the dead tissue of the heart muscle after heart attack, which actually as a result of using stent. So it is very important technology. And actually, the current technology in the market, we already have cooling technology in the market, but those technology are actually for brain protection in the case of the heart stop, which is very different from what we do. When they're trying to apply to the heart attack patients, those technology are too slow. So we actually developed this technology, and actually there's a big cooling system. I mean, not big, but another cooling system outside. I could not bring it here. Anyway, we actually did the animal study last year in December, and we found that we were actually amazed by that too. In our first study, we can cool the heart down within 2 minutes. To give you the perspective, the standard, the fastest actually, the fastest cooling technology in the market right now take an hour to cool. So we actually more than 30 times faster than the current technology. And I probably don't need to say that angel tax credit is is a big part of this, because when I raise money, this is done after I have first funding, right, to do this. But when we don't have the money, I mean, we don't have this yet, we only have the idea. It was the angel tax that actually helped us, convince the investor who believe in technology but have some hesitant because of the risk of that state. So I don't need to echo the point that Mr. Missling has been said. And actually, my case is actually the same. 80% of the money that I raised actually come out from out of states, from Pennsylvania actually, but obviously more than 90% of my spending is in Minnesota. So we is actually attracting this. And heart attack is a big problem in the world, not just in the United States. We estimate that the market size is to be more than $1 billion only in U.S. alone. The point here is that will create a lot of jobs in the future, because obviously for $1 billion. I cannot do it myself. But the other point that I want to add is that I used to work for Boston Scientific. That's how I got some experience to do this. And even we raised the first money, we don't have a lot of money. I'm very fortunate to have a lot of people, a lot of network that help me both on the technical and the business advice and assistance. So we built this technology, actually in my basement. So this is a real garage startup, just like Earl Buchan started Medtronics many years ago, and I hope to repeat that history again. Anyway, because we are here in the metro area where we have a very diverse background, it's really helped us. And I also got a lot of help from University of Minnesota as well. Dr. Paul Isio provide both the advice and some other assistance for me. So that is very important that I want to share. In the early stage, like where we are right now, we need various type of skill. So it's not one specific. It's not just engineering. We need a lot of things. So it would be very difficult for me if I said that live in the loot or something. One thing I want, before I end my talk, I want to say that last year I had some privilege to be invited to present my projects to Dr. Fogarty. I don't know if anybody knows Dr. Fogarty. He's in Bay Area in California. He's almost 80 now. In the 60s, he invented the first catheter to remove clot from the artery without surgery. Well, I was very intimidated. I am not, before my life before NovaMed, I was just a scientist. I don't know anything about the business, so I learned everything from actually a lot of people around me. So I was very nervous to present to the idol of the medical device industry of the world, and to go to the Bay Area, which is, you know that. So I was very, very nervous. So, but when I presented that, I have to say that my mentor here, Dale is one of them, prepared me so well that I can answer all the questions. I made very good impressions, to the team there. Even being just one guy starting the company in my basement. So we have a lot of things here that I want to say. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Representative Ward. Well, thank you for your testimony. I really appreciate it, and I have had a couple of conversations with you, and I've been wanting to catch up with you, so good. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr.
Promote.
Promote?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Promote, can you tell me, I thought I heard you say that you started out of your basement, just on your own?
It is still in the basement right now. Yes, sir.
It is still in the basement?
Yes, sir. But I have very fortunate. I have my friend who is electrical engineers that built the system for us. Actually, the system was built by the University of Minnesota on that senior design project, and then my friend continued the work after the student was done with that semester.
Okay.
Representative Ward.
So I wanted to get to a question about, and did you say it would be difficult for you to move up to Duluth?
Well, I would say so, because here,
Probably not Brainerd.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean particularly Duluth. Maybe I shouldn't mention the city in particular.
I just want to, verify what you said, and you're welcome in Brainerd anytime. But so because of the technology, because of the knowledge and base here, and those type of things, that's what you're saying as you're developing this company, correct?
Correct.
So tell me what you project as job growth within your company because of the angel tax.
Well, I have to say that, to answer your questions, for startup, number one, we have to be lean. So we're not going to, even though we have needs to have a lot of people to do this project, this is not a small project. We would need hundreds of people to do this, but we can't hire hundreds of people. So before I can give you the number, my point here is that there's two sides of that. One is that we're going to grow our company organically. So that would probably going to be between 30 to 50 people that I see, we're going to grow into the team before we would be acquired, or, well, who knows, we might go to an IPO, become independent company. But realistically, I think the economic impact that we're going to make is actually by outsourcing our work to the local company. And, for example, last year I went to a clinical conference, and there's vendors that come from Pennsylvania about, clinical study. In my mind, I was thinking, why do I want to talk to, she's good, but we have great people that doing clinical study. Why do I want to talk to someone in Pennsylvania?
You don't.
So that's my point. I want to say that the economic impact that we will create is not only how we grow our company organically, but also the work that we have to send out.
So, Mr. Chair, final
Representative Ward.
Thank you. So you expect to see some significant growth within the
Definitely.
stock market. And again, just on a personal note, did you say your device takes the place of a stent? I'm really interested in that right now.
Oh, definitely. I'll try to be concise on that. Okay, well, when you have heart attack, not you, when someone have heart attack, I'm sorry, that's always the bad thing. When someone have heart attack, the first thing that the doctor want to do is open the blocked artery by stent, which is intuitive. You get the flow back to the tissue that's dying. But what people don't know, even in medical communities, don't talk about that, is that the flow that coming back to the tissue actually start attacking the cells, induce another set or informations. So it's like, and we know about this, and the scientists know about this like long time ago before I was born actually. But what you're going to do? Because if you don't open the blocked artery, it will die anyway. So the cooling help by prevent that. So we are not replacing stent. We actually make stent works better.
Thank you for that information. Will you make an appointment with my LA?
I want to add that, like, we are talking about 80% reductions of the tissue death, compared to using stent alone.
And that's very huge.
Mr. Chair.
Certainly hope, I see no other questions at the moment, and we're going to try and get on to Representative Norton's bill. But I will say, your technology is very exciting. There's not heart issues in my family, but I do know a lot of people that have that particular issue. Yes, no one said I had a heart, but and your technology, and I've met, members. I had breakfast with Mr. Pamor.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there was 8 or 12 other entrepreneurs. This is a fabulous program. It just cannot be. I'm beating a dead horse. It's a great program. We do need to fund it. It does create a lot of jobs. And most businesses take, after they're actually a business, because yours is not really a business just yet. Yours is a startup. It takes 5 to 7 years. So this, if we're going, before they really start ramping up on employees. More people know that. So this does have to be given a chance to actually follow through. I hope it spreads itself out. Representative Rosenthal, do you have any closing comments before we I make the motion to refer to taxes?
Mr. Chair, I don't think I could do it any better than my testifiers.
Smart man. Brevity. Brevity is always good. So, members, all those in favor of re-referring House File 2268 as amended to taxes signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? You're on your way to taxes. I hope there's a few changes in taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members.
Next on the agenda is House File 2633. Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome to the meeting.
Could I move House File 2633 to be re-referred to taxes, please?
Yes, you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move very quickly here because my testifier is needed upstairs in just a few moments, and I would like him to testify before he leaves. So I'm just going to kind of give a brief overview. You heard the angel investment tax credit bill just a moment ago. This is very similar to that, and it has several exceptions. So what we're trying to do is have $5 million be directed specifically to Greater Minnesota. As you saw, and you'll see a handout in just a moment, Greater Minnesota was not one of the winners in the Angel Investment Tax Credit Program, and we would like it to be a winner along with the, what was it called, the Golden Crescent.
He is starting.
It is. I'll start spreading that. The Greater Minnesota Caucus has met, and this is on their list of priorities as well, and I wanted you to know that before we get started. The three major differences in the bill that you just heard and the bill before you right now is that it is targeted to rural Minnesota. The credit rate is 50% rather than 25%. It includes agricultural processing and manufacturing businesses, which have been exempted from the angel investment bill that you just heard. That was focused more on high-tech and innovation. And high-tech and innovation is desired out in rural Minnesota as well, but that opportunity still lies within that the other bill as in addition to this. And then the other change you need to know about is the mandatory minimum wage is set at the average hourly wage in Greater Minnesota rather than using the Twin Cities number. And that's been an issue for many folks as they've struggled with how to use this particular program. So I'm just going to stop there and let my testifier go so that he can get upstairs, and then we can get back to questions when we're done.
Thank you, Representative Norton.
Thank you, Representative Norton, Mr. Chair, and committee members. I'm Randy Kerr, Executive Director of the Albert Lea Freeborn County Chamber of Commerce and a member of the Greater Minnesota Partnership Board of Directors. And while we are very appreciative of the Angel Investment Tax Program that exists today, you will see by this handout that, as Representative Norton said, we have not been winners, and as the chair has pointed out, from our standpoint, we have a tremendous focus in Albert Lea, and we just lost about 15 members of the Albert Lea community who were here and headed off to that meeting upstairs. But one of the focuses of our community is entrepreneurship, but because of the wage requirements, because of the high-tech requirements in the existing legislation, we are not able to take advantage in Greater Minnesota to the extent that we really should be able to. As pointed out in another committee, we are suffering somewhat on the broadband scheme of things. So the high-tech businesses are not attracted to our communities, and the wage requirements are a major restriction. I would ask you to consider this legislation as a way to level the playing field between the Golden Crescent and Greater Minnesota. Thank you.
Former Representative Dorman, did you have a couple of comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Yeah, absolutely. Dan Dorman, Executive Director of the Greater Minnesota Partnership, an organization interested in economic development issues in Greater Minnesota. And prior to taking this job, Mr. Chair and members, for the last 6 years, I was the EDA Director in the city of Albert Lea, and can tell you firsthand that the state in general has a problem attracting enough venture capital, but as bad as it is statewide, it's terrible in Greater Minnesota, and we thank Representative Norton for her leadership on this bill in order to try to reinvigorate the economy in Greater Minnesota. The same thing is happening in the metropolitan area. One thing that we talk a lot about, and that should be a concern not just to Greater Minnesota folks, but also Metro folks, Moody's, one of the state's rating agencies, in their bond rating, in their October report to the state, highlighted their concern that there's a growing divergence between the metropolitan and non-metropolitan economy. If this continues and we don't reverse that, that's going to be a problem not just in Greater Minnesota, but Minnesota in general. We think that Representative Norton's bill would be a great first step to help correct that.
Thank you, Mr.
That's as brief as I can be, sir.
There you go. Mr. Flaherty, did you have a few comments you'd like to? I'm sure we'll open it up for questions.
My name is Tim Flaherty, and I'm here representing the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, which is 85 cities outside the metro area. And my comments can't be as brief as Dan's, but they'll try to be brief.
It's the first time I've ever been briefer than somebody, I think. That's something.
We first, as an organization, first proposed an angel investment tax credit back in 2002. Just want you to all have a little history of this. That was before the state had any angel investment tax credit, and that was because we noticed, and all the research was showing, that over 95% of the angel investment money was flowing to the Twin Cities and not to Greater Minnesota. So we thought maybe some kind of an incentive would help draw some private investment to start up companies in Greater Minnesota. So that was in 2002. In 2003, it was actually included, a provision just for Greater Minnesota was included in the House Omnibus tax bill, and but unfortunately not in the Senate. In 2004, actually, the Senate passed it and included it in their omnibus tax bill, but the House didn't, so we couldn't quite get agreement between the House and the Senate over those 2 years. And in 2005, Governor Plenty proposed an angel investment tax credit for Greater Minnesota. Unfortunately, he limited to just the Job Z zones. So what happened that year, it was passed in the House, like the governor had proposed it. In the Senate, they also passed a provision, but it wasn't limited to Job Z, so there was no agreement, so it didn't come out of the conference committee. So I'm just saying, and then we dropped it for a few years, and then in 2009, of course, you passed what you did, which we think, we agree with the concept. We think the concept is good. We've looked at other states. They have programs to attract private investment. into startup businesses, and we think that's a good thing to do. So we're happy that the program that you have works in primarily in the metro area. In 2010, we started to look at this issue, and really what we thought, well, just increase the credit in Greater Minnesota. That'll maybe attract some private investment out there. Then actually I went out and talked to some of the professionals and businesses out there, and I got educated a bit. First thing that came up in Winona was they didn't think they'd ever use the program because the high wage requirement. And all we're asking for is that the wage requirement be set at the average in Greater Minnesota, not the average in the Twin Cities. But, you know, there are these barriers that are kind of built into the current program.
Mr. Flaherty, if I might interrupt you, it's not the average wage in the Twin Cities in the original bill.
Yeah.
It is not, and I would appreciate it if you would not call it that.
Yeah, okay. Yes. Would you agree that that it ends up being about the average? I mean, that's not the technical way that it's described, but it ends up being very close to that.
It is set at 1.5% of the poverty rate for a family of 4. $18.50 an hour.
Okay, but that ends up being at a fairly high rate.
I'm just saying, if you're looking for the support of the chairman, you might want to rephrase how you...
I'll rephrase that. It's set on percent of poverty level, I think. Is that what you're saying? And it ends up, as it spills out, it's about $19, $20 per hour. And in Greater Minnesota, the average is quite a bit less than that. So, I mean, what I was hearing from the businesses was they were saying that $13 an hour for these startup things they could live with. Okay, Kim is telling me to wrap it up here. The other companies...
We have to go to taxes.
Okay, the other companies we talked to also raised some of these barriers, which I think are addressed in her bill, and we think the program will work. We want a chance to try it and see if it will work if we modify it for our communities.
Mr. Chair, if I could, just to add a little bit on the wage criteria. You are correct. It is, but I believe it's 175% of the wage requirement for a family of 4. But regardless, it is the same wage statewide, and that does present us some problems. I did speak with somebody, and they were a little bit shy to come testify today, but they're working on a startup that would actually meet every requirement in the bill except for the wage requirement. He's saying, I can't start this company and bring people in at $20 an hour. I think it's $20.03 is what he calculated at. I think it's $19.70, but it's close. And that is one of the problems that we have in Greater Minnesota, is that there is that wage difference. And so we think there needs to be 2 tiers.
Seeing no questions, how about Mr. Fabian? Representative Fabian, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to the questions about, to the point of the average hourly wage in Greater Minnesota. I heard $13. I'm not exactly sure. Can you quantify that for me? What is the number?
We, let's see, I think I might be able to find it here quickly. The average overall wage outside the Seven County metro area, the numbers we got from Deed, now this was a year ago, was $15.33 per hour. And in the Twin Cities, using that same scale, it was $19.60 per hour. So.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dorman, I think you said something about venture capital in Minnesota. Can you elaborate on why venture capital is so scarce in Minnesota, please?
Which one would like to catch that one?
Mr. Chair, Representative Fabian, I think there are a variety of reasons. Minnesota lags behind a lot of states, and a lot of states lag behind a few. There's more venture capital in states like California, New York, and other areas for a variety of reasons. Minnesota doesn't seem to attract it. it isn't. There's something happening more than just the business climate, which gets talked about a lot. I don't believe that it's just that, because there are some other states that have a similar climate that seem to attract venture capital. So I don't know that the reports that I've read, the things that I've read, I've never been convinced that there's one reason to point at it and say, here's why this capital tends to flow there. All I can tell you is it isn't flowing to Minnesota in general like we would like it to, and it sure isn't flowing to greater Minnesota like we'd want it to.
And Representative Mahoney, Chair Mahoney, I would just like to say this has been an issue when I was on your vice chair in bioscience a number of years ago and served on jobs with you. The VC issue we've talked about at length, and actually we had started, I thought, some pretty significant efforts even in southern Minnesota to interest venture capitalists to come to Minnesota, and it was just prior to the recession hitting, and we had several large firms interested in perhaps growing here, and that all stopped. And so I think we're kind of starting over and fresh now, and I think it's an issue not just for the rural angel investment, but the whole, everything DEED is working on right now in many of the areas and the larger bill as well. So I think we have a challenge ahead of us, and I don't think there's an easy answer, but I'm willing to work on it if you are.
And members, we have four people, and 12 minutes. So Representative Ugam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, I'll be brief. I just have one question. The credit rate on this bill is 50% versus 25%. Simple question. Why?
I think, Mr. Chair and Representative, I think we're just, it's a challenge, as we've seen from, I don't know if your little charts are colored and if it's easy to see that breakdown. We have a challenge in greater Minnesota, and it's just another carrot to try to get those investments out in rural Minnesota. We certainly would be willing to look in the future at making a change there if we can jumpstart this. I will also mention, I've been working with the chair. He's not interested in leaving money on the table. And so as this goes to taxes, we will look at saying if in a time certain we're not finding that this program is luring the investors, the angel investors, into rural Minnesota, that money would then roll over into the larger fund. I don't know. We haven't quite yet set a time or date. We really hoped we would have the first full year to get this going, because there's an education component, and it's going to be new. We're adding some parts to it, too. So I know we're willing to talk about that, and the chair is going to make us talk about it, I think, as we move ahead. So
very good. Thank you.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the author, in light of what Mr. Dorman said about the concern about the wage issue and the pressure on wages in greater Minnesota, I'm looking at line 2.34 with regard to agricultural processing, and I'm just curious, in light of what would be the norm for the average wage in an agricultural processing plant, I'm just wondering how that squares with the construct in this bill for a minimum wage, as it were.
Representative Norton.
I don't have an answer for that, and I think DEED is the one that would work through some of these, the details of how that goes out, but I hear Representative Dorman. What do we call him?
Representative
Mr.
Albright,
Dorman.
it's possible, I think what you're driving at is would an average food processor be able to use that, depending where you set the wage level, and the answer might be no, and if that's okay. I mean, if we set this at, let's arbitrarily use $15 for a moment, and somebody wants to pay $12.50, God bless them, go do it. Just don't use this program. This program is designed to help startups that would pay wages above average. So, I mean, I think our problem isn't that there's a strong threshold in there. It's just that threshold is different. If you set one threshold in the state, just by the nature of the economy, it disadvantages greater Minnesota. We're saying create an incentive for a like-paying job, so if it's whatever that processor is, whatever that job function is, create the same incentive so you can incentivize it in the metropolitan area or greater Minnesota. But if somebody, to your point, somebody wants to pay $12 an hour, I don't think we want them to use this program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I guess I'm next on it, and a couple people have taken some of the questions that I had. I will say that in some parts of Minnesota, I just heard a bill the other day in another committee that you can't get the workers to show up to be there because the housing isn't there. So if what you're trying to do is incentivize development in certain parts of greater Minnesota, you're trying to focus this bill, I think you might have missed a little piece of that right there, because you can start up all the companies you want, but if you can't house people in luxury apartments, as someone called them,
Fish house.
How do you start the business? So,
Mr. Chair, could I respond to that?
Sure.
I would say, just as we had our angel investor CEO here a few moments ago, these startups start very small, and in fact, they have to be less than, I believe, 10. Is that correct? It's the same as the angel investment. It's small, so it generally starts with 1 or 2 and grows. But to your point, if we hope to have the big boys out there, we will have housing and other issues to contend with. But the big girls. But right now, this is for very small businesses, and I think it wouldn't tax our communities at the early startup stage. So we have time, Mr. Chair.
Representative Norton, thank you for that answer. One of my concerns here is the way this is set up is that in St. Cloud is being considered as the same as Worthington, and they are entirely different areas. Duluth is being considered the same. Duluth, Rochester, St. Cloud are all being lumped into the same, where they get that lower wage, where I would be kind of wondering about what the wage would be and the average wage in those towns are. Because I suspect it's probably a little bit higher in Rochester and could easily be larger in Duluth or in St. Cloud. So I think you've got a concern there. For me, with this bill, I'd like to see a little bit clearer understanding of the agricultural processing, because I could certainly see agricultural processing moving into the ethanol and the chemical replacement, biochemical replacement industry, and that is, we need a little bit clearer definition of that. I'm also wondering, I know you took the angel investment bill that's been in place for a while. If we're bumping up the dollar figure that the percentage from 25 to 50, have you looked at the $4 million cap? And do you need the $4 million cap? It's a question I have. I don't need an answer right now. That's actually a tax question, but I'm just giving you some ideas that you're going to have some other questions about this particular piece.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
I have some concerns about this that really go towards the tax end of it, and as I said, with the where it lands and who gets to take advantage of this. I will talk with the author and the tax committee a little bit, and hopefully they will deal with them there. Representative Fabian, you had a question? Or were you going to just respond to luxury apartments?
Mr. Chair, you're very insightful. Thank you. It's interesting. We talk about economic development and so forth, and the bill that Chair Mahoney was talking about. I think it's probably the one that I had, because it mentioned luxury apartments in Roseau, and we don't do that. We build luxury deer stands and fish houses, but yeah, we ship them over to Representative Metza. But it's interesting we have this discussion about the average hourly wage in Greater Minnesota, and we talk about housing and so forth, and then we try to empower local officials to do something at absolutely zero expense to the state of Minnesota. And in this case, and I support these angel investment credits, now we're asking the taxpayers to dig into their wallet and help these businesses out, which I'm okay with. But when we ask for a TIF district, our local officials to create a TIF district so that they can put a tool in their drawer, we get all kinds of pushback, and I'm kind of new around here, and I don't quite understand why that is. And the major employers in my area pay a substantially more starting wage than the average in Greater Minnesota. I'm just confused by all that. And someday I'd love to have a Diet Coke with you, Mr. Chair, so we could maybe I could get more insight. Thank you.
Maybe
I'm lobbying on my behalf. You realize that?
I understood, but it'd have to be a throwback Pepsi before we sit down. I don't do diet. I don't do diet.
I'll see if I can get Jeff Gordon to give you a ride.
Just to answer, unless you wanted to go there, I can certainly give Mr. Representative Fabian an answer.
Chair Mahoney, I think that's really a tax, it's not relevant to this bill in front of us. It's really a larger tax question, and so I'd really not rather get into that, and it's not my expertise either.
And members, one of the things that we had extensive hearings in another committee about venture capital, and the venture capitalists of this world have they're doing what the big banks on Wall Street did. They're privatizing the risk and socializing the privatizing the profit and socializing the risk. And unfortunately, if we want to move many things forward in this world, we get caught between trying or not trying and socializing risk. And unfortunately, they're typically the business owners and people with a lot of money. Representative Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really quickly, Rep. Norton, why did you drop the proprietary technologies part of the original bill?
Representative Norton.
Thank you.
Representative Kiefer, Mr. Chair. Because that opportunity is still going to be available in the other angel investment tax credit. We're not doing this instead of, we're doing it in addition to, and we think what we've put in here instead will be more appropriate for rural Minnesota. And if people do want to do the other, it's still available at the 25% credit rating on the larger bill that you just heard a moment ago. I don't know if you were in here, but those are all things we could talk about. And my guess is at the end of the day, Representative Kiefer, these bills are going to be melded together. What we're trying to do with this bill is address this problem, which is rural Minnesota is being left out of opportunities. We want to be a part of them, and so we're trying to make that happen. And we're very flexible to making changes as we need in taxes, or here if you had them, but no one brought an amendment forward, so I think we'll do it in taxes.
Oh, Representative Albright, did you have a question?
Oh, well, I'll just...
Did you have a further...
yeah, just a little bit on that. I know. It's just that when the original angel credit came about, it was about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I like it. But my concern was it was just so narrow, and I wanted to see it expand to lots of other things. And so I think this is a step in the right direction, but I still think it's just kind of picking and choosing winners and trying to micromanage job growth in certain areas. And I would just like to see more and more opportunities for everybody across the state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If you have ideas, Representative Kiefer, bring them forward.
Oh, yeah.
Representative Fabian, did you have a question? Not Fabian, I'm sorry. Albright, did you have a question? Okay. Seeing no further questions. Representative Norton, would you like to renew your motion?
I would, Mr. Chair. Renew the motion that House File 2633 be referred to taxes.
All those in favor of the stated motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. You're on your way to taxes.
Thank you very much.
Representative McNamar, I think you have one more bill up.
No, you can stick it in there.
Where's John? Is he coming? Huh? Representative McNamar, I'd like to, I think this would likely stay in the committee, so we're very likely to just lay this bill over and keep it an omnibus bill, so I have more work to do on the floor and more opportunities for people to pick on me on the floor. The staffers over there laughing at me. So I will move House File 2262 for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. You have an A1 amendment. So, and it's a delete everything amendment. So I will move the A1 amendment to get it before the committee. I would ask that you explain your amendment. It's a building code issue. Go for it, and then we'll vote on your amendment.
Chair Mahoney, members, I'm Representative Jay McNamar, District 12A again, and thanks for accepting or moving for the A1 amendment. That puts the bill in the form I'd like it to be in. I'm happy to say the A1 amendment is a compromise between the League of Minnesota Cities, the Association of Minnesota Building Officials, and the Department of Labor and Industry. I have with me today Patrick Hines from the League of Minnesota Cities, Mike Jacobson from local building inspector from Morrison Benson, and John Bukowski from Department of Labor and Industry. I'd like to give a little history on how this bill came about. The City of Morris contacted me, or my office, and asked me to support a bill that the League and the Association of Minnesota Building Officials was working on. This bill changes the way that the Department of Labor and Industry delegates authority to the local building officials to inspect hospitals, nursing homes, and public buildings. I heard from Benson and other communities that they were concerned that their certified building officials were having difficulty getting approval from the Department of Labor and Industry to inspect these buildings in the past. And Chair Mahoney, I think I talked to you about this in January. The Association of Minnesota Building Officials and the League thought the current process could be made more clear, and they wanted to have more information about what standards they needed to meet in order to have authority to inspect hospitals, nursing homes, and other public buildings. I told the League of Minnesota Cities that I would author the bill, but I wanted them to work with the Department of Labor and Industries and come up with a compromise. I'm pleased that both sides, or all sides, work together, and this bill is the compromise. With this, what this bill does is this. There's four things. Number one, it gives local building officials a better idea of what they need to do in order to have the authority to inspect their public buildings, hospitals, and nursing homes. Number two, it gives building officials a chance to correct any shortcomings that the Department of Labor identifies when reviewing local departments. Number three, it provides a clear appeals process if necessary. And finally, it excludes small projects from the delegation process. Now, my testifiers are here today to answer questions. We've come up with a compromise. I think everyone's satisfied with it. We're open to questions.
Thank you, Representative McNamar. We're done at 2, so you're fully warned. Who would like to go first?
Mike Jacobson. I work for the City of Benson and City of Morris, State Certified Building Official. I'm here representing Southwest Chapter of Minnesota Building Officials. We're a chapter that runs from where I work, probably Morris on the north end, all the way down Laverne, Pipestone, along the southern side of the state to Fairmont, and then up to Litchfield. There's probably 30 of us out there, and we're just kind of all in favor of the bill. We're all looking for a little clarity in how this process works.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Patrick Hines with the League of Minnesota Cities. I want to thank Representative McNamar for carrying this bill for us, and also want to thank the Department of Labor and Industry and Mr. Rakowski sitting over there. When I first looked at this issue, I heard some concerns expressed from building officials across the state, and it certainly appeared to have the possibility to be a contentious issue. I'm happy to say that from the first conversation we had with Dolly, all of the discussions were very positive and very cooperative, and what we've come up with, which is in the A1 amendment, is a slightly different process that labor and industry will follow when they decide whether to delegate authority to inspect certain buildings to local officials. Under current law, labor and industry shall enter into an agreement for a certified building official to inspect hospitals, nursing homes, and public buildings if Dolly determines that they're adequately trained and have adequate staff. And it was that determination process which created some questions from our officials. And so working with labor and industry, we've come up with a process where the expectations of Dolly will be clear They'll be provided in writing to officials before Dolly performs their audits. If Dolly determines that if they do not grant the authority to inspect these buildings, they will provide the reasons in writing, and the building official will have a chance to cure any shortcomings. If there is a bigger dispute, this sets out a very clear process of giving the local building official the opportunity to appeal it to the commissioner and then through the standard contested case process if necessary. And then it also excludes a number of projects which are listed on the beginning of page 3 from this delegation process entirely. This list came from Dolly, and they are projects that are very simple or routine. And this just makes a distinction between perhaps the new construction of a hospital versus a remodel of the administrative wing of a hospital, which really isn't a specialized type of inspection. So we're very happy with it. We really think it will help increase the trust between state and local officials and get that relationship moving forward in a very positive direction. Thank you.
John, do you want to talk?
Would the person from the Department of Labor and Industry care to step down and affirm the fact that you've been in negotiations and come up with a really supportable bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, John Rakuski, Director of Government Affairs for Labor and Industry. And when I heard about this bill at the end of last year from Mr. Hines, the original language was something we weren't able to agree to, so we had a series of meetings along with representatives from AMBO, Association of Minnesota Building Officials, and came up with the language that you see before you. And some of you were in the Labor Committee this morning when we did the Workers' Comp Advisory Council, authored by your chairman. And this process very much mirrors the same kind of compromise process, negotiations that we do in that council. So that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Are there any questions by the members? All right. Are you guys ready from Hein? I was kind of looking for an explanation of what your bill did. It doesn't quite, from a quick reading of it, essentially what it's saying is that the department has to give you in writing reasons why they don't want you to inspect. Is that what I'm reading here?
Mr. Chairman, essentially that's correct. Before these delegation decisions were made much more informally, and that was something that the building officials wanted in writing, so we agreed to that.
And top of page 3, are those the roof covering replacement that does not add a roof load through 1 through 8? Are those that the projects that the local inspectors inspect without any questions from the Department of Labor and Industry, or are those the ones that Labor and Industry would inspect? I didn't quite catch that.
Those are the ones that the local building officials would inspect, correct?
And then
the list came from our department, however.
Okay. Could somebody explain Section 4, Subdivision 2C, the municipal fees?
Okay. I'll reserve that for Mr. Hines.
Mr. Chair and members, I'm sorry, I neglected to explain one thing that would clarify probably a number of questions. When the amendment was drafted by council, nonpartisan staff, they decided to restructure Subdivision 2 in a number of ways. And so if you look at the bill, Section 4, Section 5, Section 6, 7, and 8, I believe, and council can correct me if I'm wrong, this language was deleted on page 1 and simply reinserted, and council on the Senate side just made it into subparagraphs. So none of that language, starting with Section 4, is different from current law or has anything to do with what we've worked on Dolly with. It was just the nonpartisan staff's desire to rework the section while we were in it.
So, thank you, Mr. Hines. What you're saying is Section 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all current law. They're just being moved from one section of the statute books to another?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. Unless there's one of the sections that is not. Maybe council can verify.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, this is actually an amendment that was put on in the Senate, so it reflects Senate Council restructuring. But I guess I would, probably Mr. Rakowski would be the proper person to respond to the fee question on the fees that are charged and the surcharge and who holds those on the current law versus what's in this.
But otherwise, Ms. Newman, this is, just read positioning language, that's why it's underlined? Sections 5 through 8?
Mr. Chair, the underlying with these new subdivision designations, with the revisor system, that is how even existing language has to be portrayed if it's moved from somewhere. I have not, however, gone through and verified that all this language is exactly in current law.
Mr. Hines.
Mr. Chair, members, thank you. With the fee language, I believe the language on line 1.11 through the word facility on line 1.15 is the language that now appears under the new title municipal fees on line 3.15 to 3.20. Now, there some of that I believe is different because it has to reference the new subdivision 2B, but that's essentially that language. And I think the only change is just a necessary change to reflect that we added a new subdivision.
Thank you. Any other questions from the Representative Baby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to your question about the written explanation for deficiencies and so forth on lines 2.18 and 2.20. It's kind of open-ended, having done some work in permitting and so forth myself. Would it be advantageous to the cities and so forth to have some sort of a window there as to the timeline for when that letter from the commissioner would be given to them? It's something that you should maybe consider as the bill moves forward. I would encourage you to do that so that it doesn't become open-ended and we have some definite...
Take them 5 years to write the letter?
Well, you never know. Representative, if I may, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
No. Thank you, Representative McNamar. I think this is a good bill. It allows our local officials to do what they do best, which is take care of their problems. Thank you.
Having had the A1 amendment explained to me, code's pretty near and dear to my heart, so I typically would have adopted this to get it in the order that an author would like. I wanted to hear the explanation first. So I will renew my motion to adopt the A1 amendment. All those in favor of adopting the A1 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. The A1 amendment is on. And we are laying this bill over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. So, having said that, we don't have to do anything further with it. Thank you for coming down. I know it's a long drive from us, but hopefully the weather was nice, and you, like me, you kind of go to that happy place and enjoy the scenery.
Thank you, Chair Mahoney and committee.
Thank you. I want to make sure all members are aware that we are coming back at 6 o'clock tonight in room 5. The who? Any freshmen? Are you looking for dinner? Yeah, okay. Chocolate, dinner, whichever, same thing. Dessert. So, members, the committee stands in recess till 6 o'clock in room 5 tonight.